The Chalcedon Foundation presents Deuteronomy, Volume 5 of Commentaries on the Pentateuch, written by R.J. Rushdoony, narrated by Nathan F. Conkey. Chapter 1. The Covenant Prologue. Deuteronomy chapter 1, verses 1 to 4. These be the words which Moses spake unto all Israel on this side Jordan, in the wilderness, in the plain over against the Red Sea, between Paran and Tophel, and Laban, and Hazeroth, and Dissahab. There are 11 days' journey from Horeb by the way of Mount Seir unto Kadesh Barnea. And it came to pass in the 40th year, in the 11th month, on the first day of the month, that Moses spake unto the children of Israel, according unto all that the Lord had given him in commandment unto them. After he had slain Sihon the king of the Amorites, which dwelt in Heshbon, and Og the king of Bashan, which dwelt at Ashtaroth in Edrei. Deuteronomy chapter 1, verses 1 to 4. The editors and the publishers of the Layman's Bible Commentary preface Deuteronomy with the statement that the Bible is the word of good news for the whole world. It is not the property of a special group, nor merely for the church, but for all mankind. Deuteronomy, together with Genesis, the Psalms, and Isaiah, is the most quoted book of the Old Testament by the New. Our Lord, in the temptation in the wilderness, answered Satan 3 times, and each time from Deuteronomy. It is written, Man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceedeth out of the mouth of God. Matthew chapter 4, verse 4, Deuteronomy chapter 8, verse 3. It is written, Thou shalt not tempt the Lord thy God. Matthew chapter 4, verse 7, Deuteronomy 6, verse 16. And, Get thee hence, Satan, for it is written, Thou shalt worship the Lord thy God, and him only shalt thou serve. Matthew chapter 4, verse 10, Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 13. Among the 4 Mosaic books giving God's law, Deuteronomy has been the most widely used by Jews and Christians. The meaning of the word Deuteronomy is second or repeated law for many people, because this is in effect what the book is. But in Hebrew, the name is taken from the opening statement, These be the words, Deuteronomy chapter 1, verse 1. The Hebrew form is legal, because the law is a covenant, a treaty between God and Israel. It was a law given as an act of grace. Its meaning was very ably summed up by P.C. Craigie in these words. In summary, the covenant was the constitution of a theocracy. God was king and had claimed his people for himself out of Egypt. The people, who owed everything to God, were required to submit to him in a covenant which was based on love. There was no merit or worth in Israel that led God to establish his covenant with them, nor is there any merit or worth in the church. All is God's sovereign grace. Various scholars have analysed the constituent parts of covenants in antiquity, all of which are similar. Craigie summarised this in reducing covenants to their component parts. 1. Preamble. These are the words, etc. 2. Historical prologue. 3. General stipulations. 4. Specific stipulations. 5. Divine witness. 6. Blessings and curses for the maintenance or breach of the covenant. It is an amazing fact that so many people insist that God's covenant and his love are unconditional. When I wrote against this in early 1991, I received many letters calling my statement heresy, and even now, March 1992, I get such mail. What such people do is to bind God unconditionally once they, quote, accept, end quote, him, while feeling free to go their way. This is not Christianity. It transfers sovereignty from God to man. It is the essence of Pharisaism, whether in Judaism or in the Church. I have often cited a classic example of this kind of ungodliness, and it must be repeated again and again to arouse people to this evil. In Arend den Bas's words, RB theme: you can even become an atheist, but if you once accepted Christ as your Saviour, you can't lose your salvation. Apes and Peacocks, page 22. Do you know that if you were a genius, you couldn't figure out a way to go to hell? You can blaspheme, you can deny the Lord, you can commit every sin in the Bible, plus all the others, but there is just no way. A New Species, page 9. Theme is not alone in teaching this view. A covenant is conditional, but God's covenant is all-encompassing. No area of life and thought can be outside God's covenant and law. There's a difference between Deuteronomy on the one hand and Exodus, Leviticus, and Numbers on the other. Instead of reading, "And the Lord spake unto Moses," Numbers chapter 15 verse 1, etc., we read, "These be the words which Moses spake unto all Israel," Deuteronomy chapter 1 verse 1. What Moses says is no less inspired. The difference is that here he speaks directly to the families of Israel to summarize and amplify God's covenant law. As Blair pointed out, the central notes of Deuteronomy are three: remember God's grace and providential care, obey God's law words without hesitation and fully, and behold, what his promises are to you if you are faithful. We can add a fourth. Verse 1 makes it clear that Moses is speaking to all Israel. Old and young are alike addressed. None are exempted from hearing Moses recount the requirements of God the King. It is their only safeguard against apostasy and judgment. The neglect of God's law today invokes the same judgment as it did then, and over again in history. In verse 4, God, through Moses, reminds one and all of what he did for them in defeating Sihon, the king of the Amorites, and Og, the king of Bashan. What he did to their enemies, he could do to Israel and to us. I have referred to the heresy and evil belief in an unconditional covenant and unconditional love. Unconditional love and covenants are confused with the doctrine of eternal security. Eternal security has reference to the fact that those whom God has truly saved can never be lost because their salvation is God's work through Christ, not man's work. To believe in an unconditional covenant and love shifts the entire power of security from God to man. Our children are by blood our seed, but for apostasy and sin we should cut them off. They are then by blood still our children, but not by faith. The relationship is ended. We do not love them unconditionally without sinning. God could call Israel my son in Exodus chapter 4 verse 22. But he could and did cut them off as dead branches in John chapter 15 verses 1 to 6. When God speaks of the destruction of Og, king of Bashan, and Sihon, king of the Amorites, he is reminding Israel of what he does to his enemies. Let Israel beware. Deuteronomy stresses the fact that God is the covenant Lord, the sovereign who in his grace and mercy gives his law to a people without merit. He promises to bless them for faithfulness and to curse them for their lawlessness. He is the redeeming God and therefore the great judge over all. Redemption cannot be separated from judgment. Redemption is from sin and death, and it requires a death penalty for liberation from the death penalty upon us. In the Old Testament, this freedom came by the sacrificial system, the unblemished animal signifying the Christ to come. In verse 4, we see that this was the 40th year since the departure from Egypt. God's conditional love and covenant had sentenced a generation to die in the wilderness, except for Caleb and Joshua. The covenant God requires a full and uncompromising allegiance. The churches have too often preferred a bastard culture, one deeply in debt to humanism and its world, with a smattering of the Bible and much larded with sentimental pietism. In Deuteronomy 27 and 28, we have God's promises of blessings and curses for covenant keeping and covenant breaking. Immediately thereafter, God, in Deuteronomy chapter 29, verse 1, declares himself to be the author of all the words in this book. These are the words of the covenant which the Lord commanded Moses to make with the children of Israel in the land of Moab, beside the covenant which he made with them in Horeb. According to Schneider, the journey from Sinai or Horeb to the border of Canaan could indeed have been made precisely as we are told in verse 2, in 11 days, but it took 40 years, verse 3, because of their rebellion, and Schneider calls this fact a bombshell. It was that, in fact, a very obvious fact evidencing God's displeasure. The usual division of Deuteronomy is into 5 sections, chapters 1, verse 1 to chapters 4, verse 40. Moses reviews Israel's journeys and urges them to be faithful to the covenant and its law. 2. Chapter 4, verse 41 to 31. Moses sets aside 3 cities of refuge. 3. Chapters 4, verse 44 to 26:1 following. We're given a summary of the law with special emphasis on worship. Chapter 12, verse 1 to chapter 16, verse 17. Government, chapter 16, verse 1 to 18, 1 following. Criminal law, chapter 19, verse 1 to chapter 21, verses 1 to 9. Domestic life, chapter 21, verse 10 to chapter 25, 1 following. And sanctuary rituals, chapter 26, 1 following. 4. Chapters 27, verse 1 to 30, verse 1 following, are concerned with the enforcement of the law and the renewal of the covenant, with its curses and blessings declared. 5. Chapters 31 to 34 describe the last days of Moses, the charge to Joshua, the delivery of the law to the priesthood, and Moses' final words and his death. It is interesting to note that Henry H. Shires and Pearson Parker, both modernists, still call Deuteronomy one of the most decisive books of history. Whatever their reason for so writing, we can better understand Deuteronomy's decisive character in Calvin's words. Calvin saw the thrust of the book thus: God's discharging of us from the hands of tyranny of our enemies was to the end that we should serve him in holiness and righteousness all our life long. And this is a doctrine very common throughout the whole Holy Scripture. Calvin said further, "Had the people had one drop of wisdom, they should have yielded themselves with all humanity to receive the doctrine that was preached to them by Moses." Israel's problem, said Calvin, was the scant and slender hearing of God's law. However, Calvin added, "We be more blameworthy than the Jews for giving so slender ears to our God, given our very great blessings and knowledge." The blessings we enjoy, Calvin noted, are not the product of our own power, and we should therefore never forget the grace and power of God. Moreover, we must note that the doctrine which is set forth in the name of God serveth not for one age only, but for all ever, and keepeth his force and strength continually. God did not speak, to the end that his doctrine should be buried after an age or twain, but that it should be set forth to us to the end of the world. As Lange noted, obedience is the principal thing in every household of God. It is interesting that Deuteronomy came to be known among the Jews as the Book of Reproof, because God spoke of their waywardness. It should serve the same purpose today